Every year, over £21 billion is stolen from the UK's public purse. Money that's meant to treat our sick, educate our children and keep us safe. Alongside crack teams of investigators.
This guy's got to be stopped as soon as possible.
She had defrauded the NHS.
We're tracking down the fraudsters, stealing our public money.
This man had effectively treated the NHS like a cash machine.
Locking them up.
They were going to be spending a lot of their time inside a prison cell.
And getting the cash back where it belongs.
We recovered close to £1 million.
She was ordered to pay just under £1.4 million.
I'm after his house, his car and some money.
Just over £23,000 back into the public purse.
Fraud Squad, the hunt is on. Today, a 40 grand a year NHS manager takes a gamble when he uses a company credit card to splash the cash on himself, rather than those who need it.
When I looked at the receipts, I was quite shocked to find that his purchasing was for non-essential items. It's not the correct use of public funds.
HMRC officers hunt down the ex-boss of an exotic male dance troupe who goes on the run after stripping the public purse of thousands.
She suddenly found herself in a world that really only spies and con people, actually exist.
And cowardly thieves target two vulnerable elderly women, snatching their life savings.
They were part of what was clearly an organised criminal network. This case identifies a real disgraceful trait in these individuals.
When we think of the NHS, we immediately conjure up images of doctors and nurses. But as one of the country's biggest employers, there are thousands of people who work behind the scenes. Our next case deals with a middle manager who abused his position and used it as a licence to print money.
Certainly from a wider perspective in the trust, he was perceived as the go-to man.
Rather than spending health service money on the community's vulnerable and needy, a 40 grand a year procurement manager is splashing the cash on himself. Whether it's just a few pounds or few £1,000s, investigators will track NHS swindlers down. And the threat of jail is very real. Hot on any criminal's tracks is Health Service fraud investigator Sam Willoughby. Having spent over 24 years wheedling out cheats and liars, her wealth of experience means she leaves no stone unturned when it comes to protecting our public purse.
To buy scratch cards and cigarettes with public money was quite disgusting.
Southampton, Hampshire. Sam Willoughby receives a call from the financial controller of the Solent NHS Trust, who informs Sam that there's been some unaccounted for spending on a company credit card.
Initially, the concern was that there were just gaps in the recording, so things like it didn't say what the items were that had been purchased, for instance, or what budget they were to be paid for out of. So that caused the member of staff to have a look at the spend in more detail, where they noticed that some of the purchasing was happening in supermarkets.
An NHS credit card is given to a senior manager for buying office supplies online during the working week. So the fact that it's being used out and about sets alarm bells ringing. Sam starts her investigation by looking at the spreadsheet where all NHS Solent purchases are logged.
You could then see a clear pattern of where the spend happened at the weekend, and that was pretty much always in supermarkets, petrol stations or corner shops where a PIN number was required.
By checking with the financial controller, Sam establishes the person holding the PIN number for that specific credit card is a popular staff member.
The procurement manager, his function was to manage a small team of staff whose job was to do all the purchasing for the trust. So that included like big contract type purchasing and the ad hoc day-to-day purchasing of items. And some of those items were purchased using a company credit card. That was the credit card that was in his name. He was very well respected at work. He was a very popular member of staff, and certainly from a wider perspective in the trust, he was perceived as the go-to man. So if you wanted anything, he was always available to help you out and would sort out things for you.
It appears the procurement manager is blatantly exploiting his position of trust and dipping his hand quite regularly into the public purse. With a list of irregular purchases, Sam needs to find out exactly what those purchases were for. She starts at a petrol station.
The petrol station that was locally based, we were able to visit them first, and they were able to supply me a copy of a receipt. So the entry on the spreadsheet shows that the items purchased on the 13th of July were for phone chargers. However, the receipt that was obtained at the time shows that the purchase was actually for petrol. Another receipt shows purchases of cookies, a bread roll, ketchup, stock cubes, and some sort of greetings card. As a collective, it grew into a larger sum of money, but each individual item was generally initially under about £20. And also what he was doing with the spreadsheet was that he was coding each item to a different budget.
The procurement manager would log his purchases as being for the NHS Trust. Using the company credit card for these small payments and spreading them across 10 different budgets was his way of thinking he would stay under the radar.
It wasn't just about the fact that he had used the trust credit card to buy things that he shouldn't have bought. It was the fact he went that one step further and falsified entries into what is essentially accounting documents to hide that spend. In addition to lying about what he had bought, he also was coding that out to individual budgets within the NHS to spread out the cost so it didn't show up in anybody's individual budget. That, to me, made it more shocking and proved to me that it was a much more deliberate act than just mixing up the credit card in his wallet and just accidentally making a purchase. It was much more serious than just buying something.
Later, Sam makes another shocking discovery. The procurement manager had done it before.
There was already a suspended sentence in place. I was absolutely gobsmacked.
In days gone by, people used to believe that the safest place to keep your money was under the bed, preferably in a biscuit tin. But now, of course, we know better. Our hard-earned cash is kept in the bank, safe and secure, ready for a rainy day. But what if before that day comes, you find out it's all mysteriously disappeared?
Two cold-hearted crooks are ready to pounce on their next victims.
They were part of what was clearly an organised criminal network. This case identifies a real disgraceful trait in these individuals.
They're targeting the life savings of two elderly women, snatching over £180,000.
It's sickening that these types of frauds are targeting elderly, vulnerable people who've saved up all their lives.
Using stolen identities, these calculated criminals subject their victims to misery.
They were devastated and felt totally violated as a result.
This emotionally charged case lands in the lap of experienced investigator Tony Blake. Every crook's nightmare, he's been in the business for over 30 years and has put hundreds of criminals behind bars. He's currently the head of fraud prevention at Dedicated Card and Payment Crime Unit, known as DCPCU, which brings banks and the police together with one shared goal: to catch financial fraudsters.
So I've been on the DCPCU for about 10 years now, but prior to that I was in the Metropolitan Police, working on different squads. A lot of my service has been as part of murder investigation teams and looking at organised criminal gangs. And we're seeing now the people that were on these sort of street gangs, if you like, going into fraud. So there's been a real change in the last few years. And of course, it's the #1 crime now, fraud. So what criminals were committing other types of crime, we're now seeing them committing fraud. Perhaps there was a number of reasons for that, but that's exactly why units like ours and others, similar fraud units throughout the country, exist to go after these criminals.
Slough, Berkshire. A 26-year-old businessman walks into a branch of a well-known bank, shows his ID and opens an account.
An individual opened initially a personal account with them, and then subsequently, only a couple of days later, he opened a second account, a business account. Lastly, he'd opened another savings account with them, so he'd opened 3 separate accounts.
Nothing particularly unusual about that. And 2 days later, a few miles away in Windsor, in a different branch of the same bank, another apparently respectable 36-year-old man follows suit.
A second individual opened 2 separate accounts. One was a business account initially, and he subsequently followed that up with a personal account.
What the helpful bank tellers couldn't possibly predict is that these 2 respectful gents are in fact ruthless financial criminals. Foot soldiers of a mysterious organised crime group. And no one suspects they've already put their devious plan into action. A month later, and Christmas is just around the corner. A 91-year-old woman decides to check her savings account and can't believe what she sees. Tens of thousands of pounds of her life savings are missing. This distressing case is immediately referred to Tony.
We received a call from a bank telling us that they'd identified that one of their customers had been the victim of a large-scale fraud involving over £80,000.
A devastating loss for anyone, but causing unimaginable distress to this vulnerable woman.
She was a 91-year-old lady and had a significant amount of money in her account.
Tony quickly establishes this fraud is targeted and calculated.
The reason that this victim was targeted is because the money was lying in what banks call dormant accounts, where sometimes particularly older people will have accounts where they'll leave a significant amount of money and not touch it, but have other accounts where they pay their pension into.
Tony is determined to crack this upsetting case, but with the investigation just in its infancy, he's alerted to another identical fraud.
We received a call from the bank. They'd identified a fraud taking place in relation to a 73-year-old female customer. OK, what does the CCTV show?
Another £90,000 gone from another elderly and vulnerable victim. Tony isn't going to rest until these vile criminals are brought to justice. He starts digging into the evidence and examines the account details of the victims. Curiously, there are 2 other unknown individuals linked to the woman's accounts. Completely unknown to the victims, these men are now prime suspects. Later, as more evidence comes to light, Tony gets closer to the truth.
We established that he had used genuine documents to open the accounts. Together with the CCTV of him making withdrawals, it was clear that he was well embroiled in this fraud.
Every year, the fraud squad claws back stolen cash from criminals, saving you and me, the taxpayers, millions of pounds. But what are their tips for success?
What makes a good fraud investigator is someone who doesn't accept the first answer that's given, someone who's got an inquisitive mind who will just, almost like a dog with a bone, they need to get to the bottom of it.
A lot of this is hidden and it takes quite a degree of analysis to be able to identify these frauds, and then once they've been identified, be able to pursue them correctly.
Sometimes it's just the minor differences or the slight inconsistencies that actually, once you start probing and delving further into, will turn out to be a lot more.
It's all about following the money. Sometimes it's not obvious where these frauds are, so definitely a good eye for detail.
Resilience, you really have to, be in it for the long haul. Some of these cases take years to complete, and I think you really have to stick with it.
You've got to actually be a people person as well, because you have to be able to engage with people, you have to be able to engage with witnesses, and to a certain extent you have to be able to engage with the suspects when you're interviewing them. It's best still if you can build up a rapport to try and get honest answers and to try and get them to engage with the process and answer your questions fully, rather than say a no-comment interview, which is not helpful to anyone.
A good investigator is somebody that can pay attention to detail, can interview effectively without having to refer to too many notes, but with fraud you do have to rely on quite a lot of material that you have to put to the individual.
We're really looking at where the money's gone, who has done what, and putting that in an easy to understand version for a jury.
If the person is not guilty of the offence, you should be able to ascertain that at an early stage of the investigation so that you don't waste resource.
If it's a fraudster, they'll leave a trail and I'll find it.
In Southampton, an investigation is sparked when some irregular spending is discovered on a health service manager's company credit card.
Initially, the concern was that there were just gaps in the recording. So that caused the member of staff to have a look at the spend in more detail, where they noticed that some of the purchasing is happening in supermarkets.
Trying to cover his tracks, the procurement manager is treating himself to groceries and petrol at the expense of the public health service.
It wasn't just about the fact that he had used the Trust credit card to buy things that he shouldn't have bought. It was the fact he went that one step further and falsified entries into what is essentially accounting documents to hide that spend.
Sam has noticed lots of spending on the card near to the manager's home, so contacts those stores for receipts. And what those receipts show is startling.
When I looked at the receipts, I was quite shocked to find that his purchasing was for non-essential items, like the scratch cards, for instance, and cigarettes. To buy scratch cards and cigarettes with public money was quite an outrage. It's not the correct use of public funds, and certainly in his position what he did was quite disgusting. I did ask the head of procurement and the director of finance if there was any legitimate reason why somebody would be purchasing scratch cards and cigarettes for the trust, and I was met with an absolute categorical no. There was no circumstances under which an NHS organisation would buy gambling items or cigarettes.
Why is a well-paid manager earning around £40,000 a year using NHS cash to buy such frivolous items, frittering away money that should be being spent on those in desperate need?
It appeared to me that he was running out of money from his wages by about the second week of the month, and then he was using the company credit card to buy the day-to-day purchases that you and I would buy in supermarkets and corner shops. That led me to think that maybe there were some financial problems.
The National Health Service employee is behaving like the company credit card is his own.
He was on his way to work in the morning. He was stopping at the petrol station, putting petrol in his car, buying a packet of cigarettes and a scratch card, and then driving on into work without a care in the world.
Treating the NHS like a cash cow, he's spending money that comes from honest taxpayers.
On the 21st of July, another entry is made into the spreadsheet for postage at the value of £16.68 again, but it's actually a lottery scratch card at £5 and 2 packets of cigarettes.
I'm sure if he had won millions of pounds on one of those scratch cards, he wouldn't have handed it back to the NHS. He would have kept it for himself.
With the evidence stacking up, Sam calls the suspect in for questioning under caution to Southampton Central Police Station.
I started going through sort of a chronological order of what he had, or what we had obtained, if you like, and what he had spent in various supermarkets. And I showed him the first receipt, and he straight away admitted what he had done. He very much was remorseful, and he did apologise and say that he knew he shouldn't have done what he did, and that he was sorry for what he had done, and that he would pay back any money that he had spent, on these items.
In a 10-month period, the procurement manager had used the NHS credit card 76 times, helping himself to public funds to buy everything from Christmas cards to basmati rice.
He was helpful, and he answered the questions that we put to him. He mentioned that he was in debt, but buying scratch card is not a way to get yourself out of debt. And certainly, there are a lot of people in this country who are in debt. They don't resort to crime to resolve their debt problems. They may enter a debt management plan, for instance, but they don't go and rob the NHS of money in order to satisfy their living standards.
With all the evidence in place and a confession from the manager, Sam now has to put a case forward to the Crown Prosecution Service. But as she prepares for court, she makes a startling discovery. While checking the police national computer, Sam finds a disturbing fact. The man is currently serving a suspended sentence for exactly the same crime: fraud by abuse of power.
I was absolutely knocked off my feet.
The actual day the phone call came to me from the financial controller was the day that he was in court on the other offence. But obviously at the time I didn't know that. He obviously had taken the day off, failed to tell people why he had taken the day off, and went off to court to be convicted of fraud. And during that day off, the financial controller phones me to say there's a problem with his receipts.
I had never come across anyone in my, 11 years in the NHS that had sat through an interview and barefaced not mentioned the fact that they were already convicted of fraud and the fact that there was already a suspended sentence in place. I was absolutely gobsmacked.
In total, the procurement manager defrauded the National Health Service out of £1,631. And in October 2018, he pleads guilty to fraud by abuse of position.
So obviously the judge was not impressed with what he had done, because he had obviously ignored the suspended sentence and carried on offending whilst, with the NHS whilst in that suspended sentence.
He's sentenced to 12 months in prison.
It's quite unusual for us to get a custodial sentence because we're looking at cases that are not particularly hugely high value. So on the day I was actually quite shocked. I didn't actually expect him to get a custodial sentence.
The guilty man was sent down because he was already a convicted fraudster who breached the conditions of his suspended sentence.
From a judicial point of view, that was treated as if he had ignored the court's earlier instructions.
The fraudster never told the National Health Service about his previous conviction. Had he done, they would have been able to assess whether he was a suitable person to be holding the credit card. Solent NHS Trust are now reviewing their employment procedures.
I mean, these types of cases really highlight how systems can be abused by people that want to abuse them. And this, the outcome of this really should send a firm message to anybody thinking that they can get away with committing fraud against the NHS, that A, it's not acceptable, and B, it will be dealt with, and it will be dealt with in the correct and the firmest way that it can be.
However much money they have, fraudsters are never content. In this case, a woman would rather go on the run than give up her ill-gotten gains.
HMRC fraud investigators hunt down the boss of a male strip troupe, who's had the barefaced cheek to evade paying hundreds of thousands of pounds into the public purse.
Why would you steal £1 million from one person when you can steal £1 from 1 million people?
The strip boss has to cover up. She assumes a false identity and disappears.
Even with a fake name, you can't hide.
Rob Brucker is a titan within the world of fraud investigation. With over 30 years of experience within the private and public sector, no fraudster can hide from him. And to understand the fraudster's mindset is Dr. David Holmes, a criminal psychologist who's been getting into the minds of master criminals for over 3 decades. Hampstead Garden suburb, London, home to the boss of Dream Idols, a male strip troupe. In the beginning, it was a successful venture, earning the business owner and her associates thousands of pounds. But somewhere along the line, it wasn't enough for them.
She, like many, many fraudsters, possibly did not actually have any previous offences.
The strip boss and her colleague are operating in a world where lots of deals are done in cash, avoiding any kind of paper trail and the taxman.
They kind of realised as they were going along that they were becoming more and more illegitimate as far as paying their dues.
Fraudsters are around the greed and the need. The greed being they start small and build it up when they realise they're not being caught. And the reason they do that is the need. And in most cases, they need the extra money for gambling, drugs, alcohol, or extramarital affairs. And they need to hide that money from others, so they continue the fraud.
It's not exactly known what tips the businesswoman over into criminality, but questions are raised when she's found to have been claiming benefit payouts from the Department of Work and Pensions.
When looking at her benefit payments and looking at her bank accounts, DWP investigators were aware of regular income going into her account. It became blatantly obvious that she was receiving an income clearly from working.
The strip boss appears to earn way too much cash to be claiming income support. So the investigators begin to peel back the layers and dig further into her financial history.
DWP investigators therefore contacted HMRC to establish as to whether she had a company registered and started to look deeper into her affairs of where this money may have been coming from. A joint investigation was undertaken. This led them to her bank accounts and transactions. They were tracing the money as to money coming in and money going out and to what accounts that was being paid into and from.
Despite earning a decent wedge from her male strip troupe, the naked truth is that the businesswoman has been dishonestly claiming income support and housing and council tax benefit. And just to complete the full Monty of fraud, investigators find that she's evaded paying over £100,000 worth of tax.
Once you're in so far, it's very difficult to pull out and suddenly go legitimate, because you're almost admitting to your crime. But as it gets deeper and deeper, you become more and more aware that there may be someone looking over your shoulder.
The strip boss is arrested, questioned and released on bail. Suddenly for her, like many crooks before her, the game is up and the cold, harsh truth sinks in.
So following an investigation, the fraudster ends up in court. They go to court and they're bailed to reappear at a later date. The fraudster now realises this is real. They are now in court. The potential of prison overhangs them.
She kind of like walked into this crime affair. It was a very passive crime. She didn't actively go out to try and defraud the nation. So she's someone who really wouldn't be prepared for a prison sentence and someone who would not enjoy it one bit.
And actually, they can't handle this. They can't cope with it at all. And they go on the run in the hope that they will never be found and never brought to justice.
The case is set to be heard at Blackfriars Crown Court, but the day before, she writes to her lawyer saying, "I'm going somewhere where I'm safe and cannot be found."
It's not everyone who could actually go on the run and feel reasonably secure. Clearly, she thought that she was running to safety. She was running to somewhere where she could hide, a kind of safe house, if you like. But necessarily, of course, she will have been on edge all of that time because she was a fairly aware person, fairly astute business person.
The ex-stripper boss is on the run from the law and has to shed all aspects of her previous life. She even takes a new name, Chrissy Tatum. Hold on, that sounds familiar.
It would appear she was taking on a kind of related celebrity name of Channing Tatum.
For someone who works in the world of stripping, it's maybe not the wisest alias to go under. Channing Tatum, the actor, famously plays a male stripper in the hit movie Magic Mike.
But turning it a little bit into Chrissy Tatum. Now, would you want to really draw attention to yourself when you're on the run from the law? I think not. I think this was possibly the result of being plonked down and being asked what her new name was and having to generate one very quickly, and she just thought of the first thing in her mind.
The ex-strip boss may be avoiding jail, but life on the run is no picnic. Now she's having to look over both shoulders.
And she suddenly found herself in a world that really only spies and con people, actually exist. It's a world where basically, you have to think through everything you say to anybody. You have to be very cautious about what names you respond to. You're living the life as a spy, if you like, someone who is immersed entirely in a separate identity. And you put one foot wrong and people are going to look very suspiciously at you. So it's very nerve-wracking.
Even so, she manages to remain undetected for over a year.
She probably wouldn't have been in the UK. She probably would have skipped abroad in the hope of not being caught. There are more opportunities abroad than there are here. The investigators would have circulated information to both other police forces in the UK and abroad, in addition to border forces, to ensure that she was tracked as and when she either left the country or returned.
And Chrissy Tatum's luck eventually runs out when she returns to the UK.
Having been on the run, the investigators became aware that she was in Norfolk. So off they set early morning to make the arrest.
The fugitive's 458 days on the run has come to an end. Just before she's arrested, she'd been living in a £1,600 a month rented house in Wells-next-the-Sea, Norfolk. But now she has to swap it for a rather less comfy cell.
There's a massive level of attrition that occurs if you're living as a different identity. And as time goes on, that becomes more and more difficult. I think when she probably reached over a year of actually managing to exist in a different identity on the run, she began to think that maybe she was safe and maybe she relaxed a little too much.
The fugitive even started running a company while AWOL, a business making films advertising pet supplies, which had a turnover of more than £70,000. But now she's well and truly in the doghouse, convicted of fraud and stripped of her freedom. She goes down for 28 months. And using the Proceeds of Crime Act, the police are also in the process of stripping away the money she stole so it can be paid back into the public purse. Last year, ruthless fraudsters stole £845 million from the unsuspecting public. But when these cowardly thieves target the vulnerable, it makes this criminal act an even more despicable one. In Slough, Berkshire, two women, both pensioners, one aged 73 and the other 91, have had over £180,000 stolen from their bank accounts.
It's sickening that these types of frauds are targeting elderly, vulnerable people who've saved up all their lives. You know, this is their life savings that these fraudsters had stolen.
Investigator Tony Blake is on the case and finds two men are linking themselves to the women's accounts. A few days after opening their own accounts, the fraudsters head back to the banks and put the final piece of their scam in place. An audacious, fraudulent request to link their accounts to those of two unsuspecting pensioners. Presenting what appears to be legitimate paperwork, they enable themselves to gain access to the elderly women's accounts online. Tony takes a closer look at the forms one of them completed.
This is the add a new party to an account document that the bank had. So this is the document that he was asked to sign, saying that he wanted to join his account to the lady's account. So on this page, it bears what appears to be the signature of the genuine customer, but of course it just looks like a squiggle to me, and he signed it too, and the date that he signed it. So it's effectively joining the accounts that he opened with her account as an additional account.
Exactly how the man has obtained the 91-year-old victim's account details for now remains a mystery. But what is certain is that he transfers the money from the woman's account into his own.
He did that in two separate lumps, one of around 60,000, 64,000, around that sort of figure, and another one of just over 20,000. So just over £84,000. And then once they were into the accounts, he made 17 ATM withdrawals, and he made 5 separate visits to banks to make over-the-counter withdrawals.
In total, the fraudster stole over £88,000. Fortunately for Tony, these withdrawals were all caught on camera.
These are the still images from the video, the CCTV footage from the banking hall when he went to the bank to withdraw the cash. So that's great evidence. We've got him withdrawing the cash that was moved from the lady's account into his account, and now he's withdrawing it.
And along with a face, Tony now has more conclusive evidence tying the man to his crime in the form of the ID he'd initially presented to the bank.
Part of the investigation, we also established that he had used genuine documents to open the accounts, and together with the CCTV of him making withdrawals, it was clear that he was well embroiled in this fraud.
With the fraudster now firmly on the police radar, attention now turns to the man named on the second victim's account. It's exactly the same pattern, except this man dipped his toe in a little more cautiously.
He made a couple of small transfers from the lady's account into his accounts. He made a small transfer, first of £500, then a subsequent one of £400. And the reason they were such small amounts was that he was just testing that everything was okay and nothing was going to go wrong. So knowing that he's pretty much going to get away with it, he subsequently made 2 further transfers of approximately £60,000 and approximately £30,000. He now had just over £91,000 in his bank account.
2 identical crimes involving the same sinister tactics. Could these 2 cowardly criminals be connected?
What was baffling to us was whether these 2 men actually knew each other, because at that stage we were struggling to find a close connection.
As the investigation pushes on, there's a crucial breakthrough that confirms Tony's suspicions. The stolen money sitting in the second suspect's account is removed, and guess where it goes? Yep, straight into the other suspect's account.
He'd done that by a chap's transfer for £45,000. What was a real startling revelation for us was that when we looked into the chap's transfer that he'd made, it actually gone into the second individual's account. So that linked these 2 cases firmly together.
just as Tony and his team suspects, he's dealing with a far bigger fraud. This pair are most probably mere pawns in a large, complex criminal game.
The fact that they were linked shows that they were part of what was clearly an organised criminal network.
An organised criminal gang who steal the account details of the vulnerable, then hire foot soldiers, like the two men in this case, to do their bidding. A warrant is executed for their arrest.
During the search of the house, we discovered 2 driving licences and a passport, and they were significant because we were able to establish that these were the actual documents he'd used to open the accounts. It clearly links him to the crime.
The other fraudster attends the police station voluntarily. Whilst being questioned, he attempts to throw a smokescreen over his illegal activities.
So in an interview, he came out with a story, and his story was that he's a cab driver and he picked someone up at Heathrow Airport, and that customer of his subsequently said to him, well, can you open a bank account for me? So we looked into that story, and clearly, you know, it didn't stand up.
Tony is still pursuing the gang leaders and will leave no stone unturned until he does. Meanwhile, Tony and his team now believe they have enough evidence to take the 2 foot soldiers to court. On the 30th of March 2019, both men are summoned to the Old Bailey. Before the judge, the first man immediately pleads guilty, while the other protests his innocence. But the jury don't believe him and find him guilty.
So just under 3 years after the investigation had started, they both appeared here at the Old Bailey for a sentencing hearing. And in fact, it was the first time they'd even seen each other, which is quite unique. Both were sentenced to 2 years imprisonment, suspended for 2 years, and both were ordered to do 240 hours unpaid work. And one individual who'd offered compensation from the very outset was ordered to pay compensation of just under £91,000 to the bank, because of course the bank had given the money back to both of the victims. The cab driver, on the other hand, didn't have any money and wasn't able to pay any money back from the money that he'd stolen. For us, the investigation was seen as a real success. You know, we'd managed to track down, arrest and convict two criminals who were targeting vulnerable and elderly people. You know, sentencing, some people might look at the sentencing and think that it's not an appropriate sentence, but of course, sentencing isn't in the gift of the police, and of course, judges are bound by sentencing guidelines.
The 2 fraudsters both get a 2-year suspended sentence. Their elderly victims sentenced to spend the rest of their lives marred by fear and worry.
They're not victimless crimes. Yes, the victims got their money back, but they still got to live every day with the fact that someone has gone into their accounts and taken their money, and of course they were devastated and felt totally violated as a result. So, you know, it's really important that people understand the effect it can have on individuals in these cases. You know, this is their life savings that these fraudsters had stolen.
While Tony sadly knows this won't be the last time he sees vulnerable victims fall into the hands of financial fraudsters, there is something we can all do to help protect ourselves.
If you've got money sitting in what we would call a dormant account that you don't use regularly, it's just sitting there waiting for you to use at some time, then you need to keep checking on that account on a regular basis just to make sure nothing is happening with it and everything's okay.